I think we will start. Oh, it's 22 now, but that's okay. We will continue regardless. Okay, guys, I hope you're having a good night. It's 12:02 a.m. currently, and today I will demonstrate to you guys this facet of GitHub called GitHub Actions. Yep. So the idea here is that we're going to demonstrate how to build a CI/CD pipeline in GitHub. If you're not entirely sure what that is, I will explain that later. So before I can explain what a CI/CD pipeline is exactly, I have to tell you guys a little bit about what Devops is. So Devops stands for Software Development and IT Operations. Traditionally, the way that software development works is that the building, testing, and deploying process was done completely manually. So in essence, the goal of DevOps, which is the merging of these two things here, is to deliver software at a high velocity by automating the integration and deployment process. This is typically used in Agile development. Don't worry if you don't know what that is, but for some of you who might have an idea what that is, this is what it's typical. This is the kind of like best practices and methodology that is used in Agile. So what is CI/CD? So CI in specific stands for continuous integration, and this involves automating the building and testing process. And after that comes CD, which stands for continuous deployment or continuous delivery. And this essentially involves automating the deployment process of the software to your deployment server. So what is GitHub Actions? GitHub Actions allows you to create an entire CI/CD pipeline all within GitHub. And the way that you would do that is that you would define them in what are called YAML files. And that's basically similar to other infrastructure as code applications, if you guys might know what that is. Other than the deployment server, there's literally no other third-party platforms required. And with that, we will begin the actual hands-on demo. So this assumes that you have set up what was required in the hacker guide. If not, that's okay. You guys can just watch and understand as I explain the process to you. So the first thing that I'm going to do is open my GitHub repository that I'm going to be demonstrating this in my browser. Let me go here, the GitHub Actions Workshop repository. We're going to keep that open and we'll be going back to it every now and again. And also to open the repo that you have set up in VS Code or whatever code editing software that you prefer. So I'm going to navigate to that folder. Okay, so now that I have this open, what I want to do first and foremost is create a directory. Oh, no, sorry, I don't have a webcam. I'm not showing my face. But yeah, I'm just going to be demonstrating everything on my desktop. But yeah, so can you share the repo? Yes, I could share the repo so you guys can refer to that later. But by the way, everything is in the hacker guide. Just look, if there's anything missing, you can look back on that. So the first thing that I'm going to demonstrate is where we will put our workflows. This is where you would define the CI/CD pipeline that I have described earlier. And the way that the folder that you put that in is GitHub, and then another folder in it called workflows, and I will create that right now. So I'll create a new folder, name it .github, and then I can do /, and just that's how you can also basically make a folder within a folder. Call that workflows, and there you go. So what I want to create right now is my continuous integration workflow, which essentially automates the building and testing process of my application. So let's create a new file in that folder, name it something apt like integrate.yaml. This is where we will define all our processes, essentially. So the first thing that you want to do is give it a name such that in GitHub, when it runs, it's easier to find. Let me call it continuous. I hope I spelled that right. No, I didn't. Continuous integration. And I also want to set it such that on every pull request to the master branch on GitHub, it will trigger. And the way that you do that is by defining, it's extremely intuitive, by the way, on, and then on pull request, and then specify the branches that will be triggered on. And since there's only going to be one branch, the master branch, I'm only going to specify that branch. So the master branch. And then I want to specify what jobs is it going to do exactly. So you define that under jobs. And then you name the job something, maybe like build and test. Anything, just as long as it's descriptive. And then I'm going to specify the, can I zoom in a little bit? Yes, yes, yes. It might be a little too small on your screens. Let's see. Oh, that's a little big. Is this fine? Or should I zoom in a little more? If I zoom in too much, then I can't type without it going on the other side. How about this? Is this good? Oh, you're right. I don't need the sidebar right now. I can make that smaller. Is it all right now? Okay. So, yeah. So under build and test, I am going to specify the operating system in which our tests and build will run in. Because remember, this is a continuous integration workflow, which is actually running on GitHub servers. So I want to specify what operating system I'm going to be running this on. And let's go with something simple and standard, Ubuntu, specifically the latest version of Ubuntu. And then I'm going to specify the exact steps in which I will have this process go through. Steps, and then specify that I want to use a particular pre-made script for us. This particular script I'm going to write out basically checks out the code from the GitHub repository and into the server, which it will run this the tests. So that specific script is action/checkout at v2. And then I also want to use another script that was made for us. This basically sets up Node.js because our application that we're going to be demonstrating this CI/CD pipeline with is a Node.js app, particularly a very simple Express app. So to set up Node.js, I can just type in action/setup-node at v1. And I also want to specify what node version I wanted to use. Let's use version 12, because that's what I set up my project with. Now, this is where I actually specify the commands that are going to be running on the server. So I want to basically, this particular command installs the dependencies required for the application to run, because otherwise it won't run properly in the server if we don't do a clean install. That's what CI stands for, clean install in this case. And then I also want to run my tests. You can just do that with npm test. Now, usually after this, you would also define that you want to execute npm run build, but since this is an Express app, this isn't necessary. So for more robust web frameworks such as React, Vue, or Angular, you would specify that you want to run npm run build just to make sure that your code can build. But in this case, since it's a simple Express app, I'm not going to specify this. Okay, so now we have our continuous integration workflow defined. So what I want to do now is commit this code and push it to the master branch. Created CI workflow. It's important that you add the files to be committed. I didn't do that. Okay, and then I commit it. CI workflow, and then push it to the master branch. I'm working in the master branch here, so I'm just going to push it straight to it. That's strange. Git pull. Okay. Yeah, don't know what that was about, but we pushed it regardless. Let me clear my terminal here. Okay. So to demonstrate the triggering of this continuous integration workflow, I want to create a new branch. So let's create a new one. Bit checkout -b, name it feature, because that's typically how it is. You create a new branch and then you implement a feature and then you merge it to the master branch. So switch to a new branch feature, so that branch was created. And let's make a change to the source code such that the test that we have already defined here, this is already in the repo. We want to change the code in this application such that this test fails so I can demonstrate the CI workflow in action. So let's see what I want to do here. This is where our app is in app.js. Let's see. Maybe if I change the status code here to 201, this would break our test because our test here is actually just testing in case it gets 200 as a response code when the application is run. So if we put 201, surely that will break the tests, or it will make it such that the test fails. So let's git commit this. This should fail. And git push origin feature. Okay, so when you go back to GitHub here, it shows that feature had recent pushes less than a minute ago. Okay, that's perfectly fine. And I want to create a pull request. So I'll just do that right here. Let's see, this should fail. I'm not going to mess with any of the settings here. I just want to create a pull request because on pull requests, this should trigger the on pull request to the master branch in specific, this should trigger our CI workflow. Okay, so let's go to checks to see our CI workflow running. It shows that it's named build and test, and it's also named continuous integration right here. It's running this particular job. It takes a little bit to start up, however. So it's running, it checks out the code just fine, sets up Node.js just fine, sets up the dependencies, and as we can see, and this is the expected output, that our test has failed. So at least we know that our CI workflow is working. It should fail because we changed the code such that it would fail. So let's correct our code here. Change that back to 200 as it should be. And then commit that change. This should fix it. Git push origin feature. Push that to the feature branch. And every time, remember, when the pull request is open and you change the code, it will rerun those jobs defined in your workflow. So let's go back to checks here. As you can see, it's starting up again. Setting everything up, setting up Node, clean install of dependencies. And then when it runs npm tests, it gives us a check mark. Everything passed, the job is completed. So let's go back to conversation tab here. And it shows that all checks is passed. That's good. This branch has no conflict with the base branch, and that's how you know that this CI workflow is working exactly as intended, automating all that process for us so that we don't have to do it manually ourselves. So let's just merge this. It didn't really change anything per se, but we'll merge it regardless. Okay. So now we will go to the continuous deployment aspect. So go to back to the repo on GitHub, on your particular repo, because you'd be working on your own, and go to the Actions tab. Here we can also define workflows. We don't only have to define them in a text editor. So right here, there's a new workflow button. You want to click that. And here it will give us a wide selection of workflow templates that we can choose from. In particular, I think I'm interested in this one, deploy Node.js to Azure Web App. So I'm going to click set up this workflow. Let me name that to something better, like deploy.yaml on the top. This is a little small, so let me make that a bit larger. Yeah. Okay. So here, there's a few things that I want to change. First of all, this one doesn't have a name. I want to give it one. Name continuous deployment. And then it seems that it's triggering on release of types created. I don't want that. Let's change that. Instead of release, we want to change it such that all pushes to the master branch will trigger this deployment workflow and then deploy to our Azure web server, which we will set up later. So on push branches master. So that's looking pretty good so far. And then I also want to change the node version because right here by default it's 10, but I actually want it at 12 because that's what my app is using. And then I also want to change the name of the job here to deploy because we're not really building anything in this case. Like I said before, in more robust web frameworks, you would do run a build. Like here it shows npm run build. You would run that in other web frameworks, but this one is really simple, so that's not necessary. And I want to delete the npm build and test part because we're not building, and the tests have already been run with our CI workflow, so there's no use in running tests again. And then I'll also want to change the name here into something more, actually what it's actually doing. It's just running npm install. Okay. This is looking pretty good so far. And now we want to set up our actual deployment server on Azure. So let me minimize this. Be sure to log into your Azure account if you haven't done so already. And go to portal.azure.com. And when you're here, the first thing that you want to do is click Create a Resource. And here you want to click Create Web App. And here on the things that you have to change, let's see, resource group, there isn't one already. So I will define one. Maybe name it like, it could be literally whatever. I'm just going to call it my-resource-group because I don't have any particular name in mind. And in the instance details, you want to specify a unique app name. I'm just going to name it my-app123. Okay, it looks like that one isn't taken, but for you, yours may be different. And for the runtime stack, I want to use Node, and specifically Node 12, and then the operating system Linux, the region Central. That's fine. I'll keep it the same. And here, SKU and size is actually specifying the resources that you're going to be using on the server. So for our purposes, 210 ACU and 3.5 gigabytes of memory is a little too much, especially considering how simple this app is. So I will change that. And especially since they might charge me if I let that running for a bit. I don't want that. So click on change size and then go to dev/test. And there's actually a free one here. which gives us 1 gigabyte of memory and 60 minutes per day of compute time, more than adequate for our purposes. So apply that, and then review plus create. So here you can review that all your settings are perfectly fine, and to me this looks pretty good. And then I will click create. So while that's deploying, let's change the name on our deploy CD workflow here in GitHub. Let's change the name of, let's see, Azure _ web app _ name to the app name that we defined in Azure. So for me, that was my app 123. For you, it will be different depending on what you named it. So let's wait until the deployment finishes, and then we will continue with setting up our CD workflow. Usually it takes a little bit. It takes some time to provision servers on cloud services. It's taking a little bit. It'll get there. Okay, looks like some of our resources got deployed. Okay, cool. So now that it says your deployment is complete, you can click on go to resource and it will go to your specific resource. Now, in our CI, or not CI, in our continuous deployment workflow here in GitHub, there is a particular thing here in publish profile. Publish profile basically specifies where you are publishing this. And right now it's referencing a secret that we haven't defined yet. This is where we will put our publishing credentials such that the workflow would be able to publish our app to the Azure web app that we have provisioned, or the Azure web server that we have provisioned here on the right side. So first we got to set up our secrets. So let's click here and go to settings and open that in a new tab because you don't want to lose this information here. And go to secrets, and here's where we'll define our credentials. So you click new secret. Let's name that what the workflow was referring to. It was referring to Azure Web App Publish Profile. Here's where we'll put our value. Now the value that we are looking for if you go to your Azure Web App, you can find it in Get Publish Profile on the top. So you can click on that and download it. And once it's downloaded, you can open it in whatever text editor you want. You can open it in Word. Doesn't matter. I prefer to use Notepad++. Here's all of our credentials that is required to be able to publish to our web server. Copy everything here and paste it as a value for our Azure Web App Publish Profile secret. And click Add Secret. And there you go. So let's go back to our workflow here. And now it's actually referring to a value in our secrets that actually exists now that we have defined it. So the next thing that we're going to do is commit our continuous deployment workflow that we have defined here. Now, before I commit it, this will actually trigger because I am committing it to the master branch. And as we've defined here, it says on push branches master. So it will actually trigger itself, weirdly enough. I will show this to you. So let's commit this. Created, let me spell that right. Created deploy.yaml. This looks fine. Commit new file. Okay, now that's committed. Let's go to the Actions tab. Let's go to Continuous Deployment. Looks like it's running something. Click that here. Go to Build and Deploy. Looks like our deployment is running. It's using Node.js 12. It checked out our code here. It's running npm install. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And then it's running the deploy to Azure web app job. So let's hope that we've configured everything correctly such that it will adequately deploy to the web app that we have provisioned here on the right side. Okay. Looks like the credentials are fine. Looks like it's zipping it up so that I can deploy it. And because this is a very, very light app, this doesn't really take much time for it to actually deploy on Azure. However, if you're using a much heavier app, I guess you could say, such as like a React web app or an Angular web app, this might take up to 10 minutes. So it takes a little bit of time, but at least this process is automated for you, so you don't have to do it manually yourself, and so that you can better focus on the actual development process. So I do encourage you guys to, for your purposes, implement your own CI/CD pipeline using GitHub Actions, because it will automate particularly the deployment process. It will automate that such that you don't have to really worry about that aspect of it. Maybe in your hack, you might not have too much time to test, so maybe CI might not be in your best interest when you're doing your particular hack. However, I do think you'll get some value out of setting up at least the continuous deployment aspect. Well, this is taking a little bit of time to actually deploy. Yeah, it takes a few minutes sometimes. When I last run it, it took like about a minute or 30 seconds. So I think it's nearing there. Okay, looks like it's finishing up. Okay, so all this checks mean that everything went pretty well. And to check that this actually deployed, I'm going to go to the URL of our particular web app, which is defined in our resource here. Let's see. Sometimes it takes a little bit for it to set up on its own on Azure's side as well, but that's okay. Another thing I might want to add, you can check what the actual server is doing by going to the log stream. And it shows you everything that it's running. So right now it looks like it ran node app.js, example app listening on port 8080. Okay, so it looks like it's running. And here it is. It's, like I said, it's extremely simple. So all that it rendered, you might not be able to see it because it's kind of small. All it renders is okay. So that shows us that the deployment process worked perfectly. So guys, that's pretty much all that I have for you. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. Also, feel free to reach out to me if you guys are trying to implement a CI/CD pipeline in your application. And if you guys have any questions and things like that, I can probably help you out. Thank you.